All right, let's kick off because we have lots of interesting stuff to cover. First of all, thank you so much for everybody for joining. We're really excited to talk to everybody. The way this started was lots and lots and lots of people reach out to me to talk about privacy and privacy careers. I know they reach out to Kendall and everyone on this panel as well. And I love talking to as many people as I can, but it would just be impossible for me to do half-hour phone calls with everybody. And so this was kind of our way of saying, hey, let's all get together and have a chance to talk to each other. I'm hoping there'll be time for questions at the end. For those that don't know me, I am Dan Levy. I lead the cyber privacy and e-discovery legal team at TD Bank. I joined the bank about 3 years ago from the Central Intelligence Agency, where I also worked on cyber and privacy issues. And before that, at a big firm, big law firm. And so I'm going to turn things over to the panelists in a moment to very quickly introduce themselves, and then we'll move on into the substance. But I will just say, everybody on this panel has an important job at a big company, but they are here today very much in their personal capacities because they believe in giving back and mentorship, and nothing they say is sort of attributed to their company, only to their personal thoughts. And so let me flip it over to my co-host Kendall to say hello, and then maybe Ron, Steph, Alex, and Ali can say hello after that.
Hello, guys. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I'm super, super excited for the discussion today. But I guess to introduce myself just a little bit further, piggybacking about what Dan said, my name's Kendall Mailer. I work here at Lawrence Harvey. And for further context, I'm a specialist recruiter in the data privacy and legal space. I've been here for the last 5 years and have worked across many capacities in many different industries, but all still sticking to the privacy and legal space. So hoping I can add a bit of value talking about privacy trends for 2024 from a recruitment perspective as well.
Thanks, Kendall. My name is Ron Whitworth. I'm the Chief Privacy Officer at Truist in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've been with SunTrust and now Truist as we merged with BB&T for 7 years. Prior to that, I was a sports reporter when I first came out of college. I spent 6 years covering college and pro sports, then went to law school and was an outside counsel attorney at 2 firms practicing privacy and cybersecurity law before joining a smaller bank and going from the legal side into a CPO role before then transitioning over to Truist. Great to be with you guys.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Price. I am the head of privacy at TD Bank, so I work very closely with Dan. I've been in my role now for about 3 years, at TD for 8 years, all within the privacy office. And before that, I was at another financial institution for 11 years, mostly in privacy, but also in some general business administration roles.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Reynolds. I'm with Mastercard. I'm senior counsel in our data and services business vertical, which is the business that deals with data analytics and providing services to Mastercard's clients. Prior to this role, I was with a large national U.S. firm doing privacy law in largely the same way I do now in-house. And prior to that, I worked for trade associations dealing with both privacy and telecommunications policy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ali Jasani. I'm a senior associate in the privacy and cybersecurity group at WilmerHale, based in Washington, D.C. My practice involves advising clients on all aspects of data protection law, including assisting them with investigations and mergers and acquisitions and general regulatory compliance. Happy to get into that as we go through the panel.
All right, thanks everyone. And so you see we have a real expert panel here, and I'm looking forward to this discussion. Before we jump into it, I just want to say you'll see on the side there is an opportunity to ask questions. If that's accessible to you, feel free to type in some questions. We can either try to answer them in real time or we'll get to them at the end. So I encourage you to use that. All right, so jumping into it now. Privacy has gotten so big over the last couple of years, and I gather lots of folks on this call are either joining the practice or looking to join the practice. As you can see, just from this call alone, we've got lawyers, we got non-lawyers, we got people at law firms and banks, and then privacy is at tech companies everywhere in the world. And so I'm curious about what you all view as the different types of privacy roles that are out there. So let me go over first to you, Ron.
Sure. Well, like you said, it's expanded dramatically, even just over the last year or two, in terms of the types of skill sets that you need and the types of roles that you need. It used to be, 5, 6 years ago, there was always a debate about where does privacy sit? Should it be in compliance or legal or info security or marketing? And now the reality is it needs to sit everywhere, and there needs to be privacy expertise or privacy professionals really in lots of different capacities. And so what we're seeing is the opportunity for a lot of new skill sets to enter the privacy profession. We see folks like data scientists and data governance experts, auditors, testers, people who traditionally had not had a privacy specific expertise, but had a real interest in it, have been able to make a career out of privacy specifically, because particularly at larger companies, you have a need for a lot of different skill sets to help make privacy work well, given the scope of privacy and AI. I know we'll mention AI later, but that it's become just incredibly important to have a variety of skill sets represented within your privacy program, and not just within the program itself, but in the supporting functions into what helps make things tick for you within your company.
And Ali, you are at a law firm, which is different than being at a big company. So can you give us your optic on that?
Yeah, absolutely. But Ron's point still kind of stands in the law firm context. When I lateraled to Wilmer 5 years ago from a different firm, and when I was interviewing, one thing that I noticed was that privacy was often part of a different practice group. It'd be a support group to litigation. It would be a support group to the corporate team. Now, privacy is becoming a standalone practice as part of its own kind of part of regulatory groups or its own standalone practice. And that's because of these new privacy laws that are popping up that we'll touch upon later. But I think Ron's point about, privacy becoming an issue, for companies overall, it's definitely extended to the law firm space as well, where we're seeing standalone practice groups that specialize in privacy.
Interesting. And Steph, like Ron, you're at a big financial institution and you're a head of privacy, but not a lawyer. And so can you talk a little bit about that experience and maybe about the folks on your team who are privacy professionals, but perhaps not lawyers?
Right. So like Ron said, privacy is really everywhere now. You can't really centralize it holistically. So while my team sits in compliance as the privacy office, we have what's called privacy designates that sit in each of the business lines. So you can have someone that understands privacy that's sitting in HR, that's sitting in technology, right? That's sitting in information security. So it's really becoming one of those privacy by design type fields where you could be in any department within a large firm and need to understand privacy or understand the risks that are involved with it. But then, as Dan said, I sit in the compliance department. I am not a lawyer. I do have lawyers on my team, not working in a legal capacity, but we're really looking for folks to join our team centrally that do have those skills from the different business lines. I typically tend to hire non-privacy people sometimes and try to fill a gap on a transferable skill that I might need on my team, such as maybe someone that has experience with AI or biometrics. I'd rather, if we don't have someone on the team with that skill set, I'd pull them in before I'd pull in maybe someone that has, just a general privacy background. So there's really room for privacy in almost any role.
That's great. And Alex, like me, you're a privacy lawyer at a large financial institution. And so I'm guessing, like me too, you're working on the legal side, but then you're also working with folks on the non-legal side as well. And so what are the roles you're seeing and sort of how does it break down at Mastercard?
Yeah, thanks. We have formal privacy engineering roles at Mastercard, largely for the same reasons that Steph was alluding to, which is you need to have an interface between the folks who are focused on privacy law, interpreting privacy law for compliance reasons and for policy and advocacy, and the people who are actually managing the products and the data flows and the services and the client relationships. It really requires a lot of different skills. And we the reason why you have a privacy engineer and you call it that is because you need people with some technical background to really understand what's going on with those data flows. Because as everyone knows, who's spent any time in privacy, it's all about where the data is coming from, where it's going, what you're using it for, and who you might be disclosing it to. So you really have to get into the details of that flow, and you need people from different backgrounds to do it.
Thanks, Alex. And Kendall, as a recruiter, you have the benefit of sort of seeing things amongst many different, companies. We don't always have that optic. We're always kind of looking internally, and it's good insight to be able to consider what other people are doing. And so I'll give you the final word on this topic. How do you see things, sort of at the conclusion of 2023, leading into 2024 now? Where are things going with the ways roles are looking like?
Yeah, we'll definitely get into a lot more of that later as well. But I would say from my perspective, while 2023 was not a huge hiring year and a growth year for many companies, and instead a lot more companies were way more cost conscious and kind of wanting to get on business as usual, unless there was that business critical or that, backfill position. I think coming into this new year, what a lot we saw from our clients in 2023 coming into 2024 was that privacy is now a core requirement in most broader senior legal positions. And I think looking further into this year, we're seeing many of our clients wanting to get more involved in AI. We're also going to see a lot of financial technology companies as well come and others under more scrutiny this year. So I do think that it's still a core requirement and something that is still, absolutely necessary, much like everyone was saying here coming into 2024. But something else I wanted to touch upon was just the qualifications and skill sets, because I know there are a lot of people on this call probably thinking about breaking into the industry or trying to further their career into the industry. So I'll pass it to Ron first and foremost. But I guess, Ron, when you hire folks, whether that be junior or senior, whatever it might be, for your privacy team, what is it exactly that you're looking for in regards to qualifications or certifications and other soft skills?
Yeah, I think one place I would start is that there's really not a one size fits all set of credentials that you're looking for. It really depends on the position, but one commonality that we do see really across my team specifically, and really across the whole industry, is that this is a field filled with very passionate people who really want to be in the field. Hopefully, I know we've got some of them on this call right now. That's why you're here, probably to hear more about it. There are just people who are quite interested in the subject matter, but also really firmly believe in the cause behind it. They're interested in wanting to protect individuals. They want to be part of something that helps people. And you see, across the industry, I've been in privacy now for, 18 years or so. You're not going to find another industry with just, really solid people, great people. They want to help each other. They want to help clients and so forth. And so when we are hiring people, we want to see that energy. We want to see that mindset. And I know that, we've talked a little bit about this. So we talked about it in last year's panel, and it's also been the subject of some IAPP panels that we've had in the past, is about, DEI and privacy and the diversity that we see and the inclusion that we see in the industry. The barriers to entry that you see in some other jobs or even some other industries, they're just not there for privacy. And there's lots of really good reasons for it. First of all, it's kind of like the mindset I was mentioning. It's filled with people who truly care about other people. They celebrate diversity. They celebrate inclusion. And you see that throughout the industry. The makeup of the leaders in the industry, it's really remarkable. And the other thing that is just that, as Dan mentioned at the onset, this industry changes so quickly, so dramatically, that you don't have people who are 25, 30-year experts in a particular area that you're competing with. I mean, there are so many opportunities that come up every single year for just completely new things, new ideas, new skill sets, AI being a huge one now, that it just allows people to enter the industry without much of a barrier. And so when we're hiring people, a lot of times, of course, we're focused on that specific role. But I think one of the most important things is, do they fit that mindset? Are they going to have that mentality? Because when they have that mentality and it truly means something to them beyond the job itself, they're always successful. And we see that really across the board at all the different companies.
And let me just interject real fast, Ron. That's just such a great point. You've been in privacy for 18 years, but things change so rapidly that you just think about what things were like 3 years ago and now. You've been doing it for 18 years, but someone who's been doing it for 3 years knows probably just as much as you do at this point, because it's evolved so quickly. So it's just an important point, because not every practice field is like that. Especially as a lawyer, there are parts of the law that have just been bread and butter for law firms since the 1970s. And there's just people who've been doing that for 40 years, that one thing. And it is harder to break into those type of practices than to something that feels like it's on the ground floor.
Exactly. It's hard to imagine, I don't know if we even mentioned AI at last year's panel, but now if you look at privacy jobs at every level, the vast majority, I'm sure Kendall could tell you, but the vast majority mention AI as a credential or an expectation. It didn't even exist 2 years ago in our world. It's just amazing how that happens so quickly. So exactly what you said, Dan, it just provides opportunities for everybody at every level.
Yeah, I would kind of jump in and say you have to be comfortable with that uncertainty, especially in an in-house job where you're trying your best to understand what's going on, to keep up with what's going on. And so when you hire people, I think it is a mindset thing that you're looking for, the mindset that you have someone who is inherently interested in being in privacy. They want to play around with the concepts that they're learning about. They want to dig into the underlying technology to really understand it. What is a hallucination with AI? Going outside of the sort of business as usual kind of day-to-day stuff, and really educating themselves so that they're prepared to issue spot things that are novel, and that novelty occurs and refreshes itself on a weekly basis at this point. So you really have to be willing to be in that learning mindset.
And just to piggyback off of both Ron and Alex, so people a lot of times ask me, like, do you need a privacy expert? I don't even know what that word is, because I wouldn't call myself a privacy expert, right? As Ron said, the landscape evolves. In a year from now, we could be talking about something totally different, and we all have to learn it and evolve and develop our skill set. So when I look to hire, and I actually can see the question in here right now about the IAPP certification, like, would love to see that on a resume, right? That shows that you have the base foundational knowledge that the IAPP provides, and that's always valued. I can tell you just personally, my hiring experience so far, out of the last 8 people that I've hired, only one has had a deep privacy background and certifications. I specifically looked for people who were going to fill a knowledge gap that maybe I had, right? So my next hire will probably be someone that has AI or biometric background. Doesn't matter if they have privacy background, because I can teach them that side, but I need to tap into what they know about that side of the field. So I've hired people that come from technology roles, people that were in a compliance testing role, governance. I've hired someone from the call center who did fraud escalations, right? Because they understood what the customer was experiencing when they lost their information or had something stolen from them, and they felt that on the personal level. So yes, having someone who wants to do this, because I think privacy impacts all of us personally outside of work, but finding those skills that maybe someone on my team doesn't have is usually what I look for in the hiring, or like the next big trend, someone who might know enough about that.
Yeah, this is all very, very interesting, useful information. I guess something else that I wanted to touch upon as well, because I think it coincides well with this question, is just D&I. And I honestly think privacy is an industry that does a pretty good job at diversity and inclusion. But I guess more of a broader question is how can the privacy industry attract and really retain diverse talent and create maybe more of an inclusive work environment, in your guys' opinion?
Yeah, Kendall, I think it happens naturally from what I've observed. Honestly, it's like I don't think that there's any, we see this all the time in other areas, especially in banking. Like they have to have initiatives to go out and really try to become as diverse as they want to become, and really, it just seems to happen naturally with privacy, just because. As I mentioned, there's lots of really good reasons for it. I think it's the type of people that are really interested in privacy are also just naturally very interested in consumer rights. They're interested in being an inclusive environment and having a diverse team. And like I've never seen really an issue in privacy. In fact, it's really remarkable when I was coming into Truist and they were asking us to really like, hey, let's talk about the makeup of your team. Let's talk about who's going to be on the team and how it should be organized and so forth. I did a ton of homework and I interviewed the top 30 banks and asked them, hey, how do you organize your programs? Who leads your programs and so forth? And I saw, and it never really occurred to me, but I saw at that point in time, the vast majority of the chief privacy officers in the top 30 banks are women. And that's just a great statement that you see. That's just in banking. If you extend it outside of banking, you're going to see a very similar pattern. It's a little bit unique, and I feel like privacy is ahead of the curve. And I feel like it's not that the organizations are necessarily focusing on it and forcing it. It just seems to be inherent within the makeup of the industry. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I also think it's inherent. Sorry, go ahead, Stephanie.
No, I was going to say, it's just like I talked about before, if you're pulling in different skill sets, right, you're going to have different people with different backgrounds, different opinions, diversity of thought, diversity of education experience. So I think the D&I sometimes just works itself out as you move through the different topics or the different areas of expertise you're looking for. It's in sort of, just happen organically.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I also think it's inherent in the field, right? Like the way privacy law cares about sensitive data, tying it to race and ethnicity, the way that certain issues tie to, protecting healthcare data and women's data. I feel like there is a certain tie that the field has where it comes to, it touches on issues that are important to diverse candidates. And so, to both of your points, I think that's a reason why we, don't really have an issue attracting diverse talent.
So let me jump in too here because I see we have a great question coming in, and actually I didn't plan this with Tatiana, but it kind of rolls in right into what we were planning on talking about anyway. So thank you. This is a question I get all the time when I am able to take those phone calls with folks interested in the field. They say, I don't work in privacy right now. Maybe I'm in some adjacent field, or maybe I'm far away and I want to work in privacy. What advice do you have? What should I be doing? How do I break in? So maybe going over to you, Alex, for your thoughts.
Sure. Kind of piggybacking off of some comments around, what is a privacy expert? We don't really know. Privacy as a concept isn't some kind of, unified field, legal or otherwise in itself, right? There's so many sub elements of it that when you're thinking about pursuing a career, I guess what I would suggest is think about what you really like or gravitate toward within privacy or within data protection, as a field, because that's going to help to give you a bit more direction about, what types of organizations do you want to try to be employed with? Do you feel like you want to be in-house? Do you want to be in government? Do you want to be doing more policy and advocacy kind of work, which is definitely, another part of this. It's not probably talked about as much. And getting the certification is a excellent start and sort of baseline to do that, but to really be effective and be effective in interviews and to kind of demonstrate that interest that people are hiring or looking for. You want to really be in this on a day-to-day basis, be up to date about what's going on generally. And again, kind of engaging with the issues on your own time and having that learning mindset so that, when the opportunity comes up, you can demonstrate that you at least have the approach and the attitude that a company or another organization is looking for.
Let me just tag on to that, Alex, and then we'll go over to Ali for some more substantive thoughts. But just on the IAP certification, which you mentioned and is in the question here, certainly I did one. I found it really valuable just to kind of round out all my knowledge. When I'm hiring, like Steph said, is it a requirement? No, because people come with all different skill sets of other things that I value. But for me, it just kind of it's a benefit because for me, it signals you're someone who's serious. You've made some effort. You're not a person who read a job posting and thought, privacy, that could be for me, and then send an application. It just shows me you put in a little extra effort. And if I'm looking at 4 candidates, it differentiates you if the other folks don't have that. Ali, what are your thoughts when people say, what should I be doing to break in? What do you tell them?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I see, or the thing that I recommend to young professionals looking to break into the space, is to pay attention to new developments. I mean, that's kind of how I got my start in privacy. I was a general financial services regulatory lawyer, and then the CCPA came up, and I just became the person to learn the CCPA. And then since then, I've added knowledge of all the U.S. state privacy laws, and there's 2 new laws passed in the last 2 weeks. So there's always new things that you can learn and stay on top of, and in an interview or in a conversation show that you are on top of these developments as a way to stand out. I think that goes a long way.
I think that's great advice for privacy and for any law students or young associates out there. That's always the way to differentiate. It's harder for the senior folks to stay current on all the new things because they have so much on their plate that is always the way to differentiate yourself and add so much value. Let's transition for a second, because other than the how do I break in, the other most common question that I get from folks is, what are you working on right now? What is it that you do all day? What do you spend your time on? These are all senior folks in privacy. So what issues are bubbling up to you that are important enough that they're filling your time? And what are the challenges that you face with those issues? So Steph, let's go over to you first.
All right. I spend my day calling Dan. Like, Dan, what do I do? No, so I'm in the compliance side. So there's the compliance aspect of my job, which is the policies, right? Controls, making sure the businesses are compliant with the law, the advocacy part, making sure we're giving them right advice, guidance, the oversight for the businesses who are actually using the data, sharing the data, right? So there's that piece. And then, the scarier side of things, like what keeps me up at night, I'm always watching for the next data breach, right? The next cyber trend, because cyber intersects with privacy a lot. And I tend to pay attention a lot in the news on where attacks are focused. And recently we've been seeing a trend in the industry where they're focusing on escrow, title agencies, closing companies, right? They're not necessarily going after big banks because they know, the big banks are secure, right? We've got our ducks in a row, but they're going after, it appears, some of the industries that, support the bigger companies, like the vendors, right? Those that have the data. So, that's what keeps me up at night. The cyber attacks, the ransomware, sort of, what's going to be the next big area that they want to target, and what kind of data are they looking to gather? So those are the kinds of things that I try to keep my pulse on when I'm not, writing policies, procedures, and calling Dan for advice.
Well, it's a good point, Steph. Since you mentioned cyber too, the other thing I get asked about is, what's the difference between cyber and privacy? Are there 2 different practices? And I think as things have developed, they've somewhat bifurcated into 2 distinct practice areas, but it's clear that it's a Venn diagram and there's a big overlap between the 2 things. And like you're touching on, when the bank has an incident, usually not direct, but when you work at a big company, your data kind of goes everywhere with various vendors and law firms and the folks that work with you. And so when these folks have incidents, it becomes partly our incident too. And that's where cyber and privacy sort of really combine into this force, because everything starts out as a cyber incident and you're sussing out who the bad actors are and what happened to your data and who accessed it. And it eventually transitions, well, it could transition into a privacy incident, and you need to figure out all the fallout. And so having people who kind of understand that full universe is really helpful. Ali, over to you at a law firm. What keeps you busy on a day-to-day? Obviously, your firm is a valued partner with TD Bank, and we work on all sorts of things together. But what is the firm most engaged in on this front?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of everything. I mean, we have, regulators are more interested in privacy issues than ever before. So we do a lot of regulatory investigations. I think now, every company realizes as part of a merger or acquisition that data assets are important, whether it relates to just employee data or whether it relates to B2B data or future data use cases. So a lot of advising on M&A deals is a big part of my practice. And then the meat of it is general regulatory compliance. And what that looks like varies, right? Sometimes it's helping a company draft a policy or procedure. It's advising on a specific issue for compliance. To be a little specific, we've gotten a lot of questions, for example, on some of these new state laws. The Washington law, for example, the Washington health privacy law has been one that's been really tricky for some of our ad tech clients, and so really focused on that, trying to advise on that. But it's a little bit of everything, and it makes the practice really interesting, but also challenging because no 2 days are the same.
I think each state coming out with their own comprehensive privacy bills and laws are a challenge for everyone. But I always say, good job security for Ali and those of us on the call who work on those type of things. I'm going to go over to Alex next, but before I do that, let me just say, if folks have questions, feel free to type them in. We're going to transition to a Q&A eventually, and if we can answer them in real time, we will, but if not, we'll try to answer them at the end. So I encourage folks to take the opportunity to ask questions right now. Alex, over to you. What do you do all day?
Again, it's a little bit of everything. There's a the day starts with compliance and then goes into policy and then wraps back around to product counseling. It really varies quite a bit, but I think there's sort of themes that come up in terms of the topics that we cover. One is a big part of it, especially in house, is reconciling the different laws that can apply and doing that in a way that becomes actionable advice to the business. It's extremely difficult to do, particularly where in my role in a part of Mastercard that deals with data analytics, you're looking at, okay, how does Gramm-Leach-Bliley impact what we do? How do state laws of general application? I have 7 colleagues who cover regions globally. How do we provide advice to a business stakeholder that has a globally distributed product so that we're taking into account all those things? And that it's just something you have to keep up with day after day. And it takes up a great deal of time. There's exploring privacy enhancing technologies and data anonymization techniques, to the extent that you can bring data out of a privacy legal regime. It tends to be a good thing because you're able to protect privacy by doing that. And more and more, as you have advanced data analytics, you have to apply advanced techniques to be able to do that, and understanding how those techniques can fit within existing privacy regimes is really important. And then AI, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more, in emerging trends, trying to that to me is, okay, we need to apply a new technology in the existing situations that we have. So when you add AI to the mix, you're having to refresh all the analysis that you've previously done to check for different data flows and different data elements, and all that detailed stuff. It gets you can go from something that is very conceptual to something that is extremely granular quickly when you're talking about compliance in-house.
Ron, I'm going to come to you on this in a second, and then we're going to go to Kendall to talk a little bit about hiring trends, and then the big salary survey that I know Lawrence Harvey engaged on. That's super interesting. But Ron, you're a chief privacy officer at a very large bank. Talking about that's a role that didn't maybe even exist 10 years ago. I think folks are curious. A chief privacy officer. You are a lawyer, but again, not necessarily in a legal slot at this moment. What does a chief privacy officer at a huge bank do all day? How do you keep yourself busy?
Yeah, so it's a lot of the things that Steph and Alex in particular were talking about. But I would say, one thing that has changed dramatically over the years is that it has become so much more than a compliance function. Inherently, I'm situated in compliance, so my job description is making sure that we are compliant with our compliance risk management framework. We're doing things like risk assessments and monitoring and testing and owning all the policies, et cetera. But I think, quite frankly, the more interesting part of the job that has really evolved over the last few years is you are a partner to the business. And it's much less reactive, like, hey, they're not coming to you at the end of the day where they're going to go live with something tomorrow, and you either check the box or you don't to move forward. Because privacy has grown in importance so tremendously over the years, it's becoming a make or break business proposition. And so getting dialed into the business strategies and having relationships with business partners and making sure that you're involved in routines with them all the time, so you understand what are they thinking, what are they going to try to do 6 months from now or a year from now, 2 years from now. That needs to feed back into your privacy strategy, and you need to be aligned with what they're trying to do and figure out how to get to yes. The easiest thing where, as a lawyer or a compliance person or risk person is just to sit back and say no, and here's all the reasons it's too dangerous to do what you want to do. That's the easy way out. The hard part is figuring out how to get to yes in a safe, compliant manner. And that's, I think the more interesting part of my job is helping us get there.
That's great. That's really great insight. Kendall, over to you to talk a little bit about hiring trends. Which parts of privacy would you consider hot at the moment when you look at the market? And maybe a little bit about the salary survey that you all engaged in.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think as of right now, I think niche industry specific experience in privacy has been more in demand, as well as multinational experience as well. But really being able to understand and interpret, like, not just the legal differentiators, I think is equally as important. This is probably more of a soft skill set to just keep an eye out for, but adaptability and communication skills and really understanding your audience. I think that's so important for a privacy professional to know and to understand. And I would say, with working with most of my clients and, taking people through interview processes and stuff, like that does tend to be historically where some people do fall short, is not necessarily in, the certifications and the hardcore privacy knowledge, but more so just like that soft skill set. Whether that doesn't fit culturally with the team or, that person's not able to understand how to speak to a team of engineers versus maybe to a team of lawyers. One stat that I do recall from our privacy salary survey, we ran a privacy salary survey back in 2022. We do plan to do another one, so stay tuned. But I would say about 59% of privacy professionals that we surveyed all have the CIPP-US certification, and that more in 2023 than ever, I've seen become a hard qualification skill set instead of a, preferred or a nice to have. So if there's anywhere that you're really looking to start, I would definitely say with the CIPP-US certification would be a really good place.
Great. And so we've closed out 1 year. We're starting a new year, which is always a time for reflection and then for looking ahead. This field, as we talked about, is rapidly changing. So I'm curious about emerging trends that people see and particularly how it may impact people's careers in privacy. So Alex, what are your thoughts for 2024? What's emerging? What do you see? Where do you think this is all heading?
I wish I had that crystal ball, right? I think, I mean, pick a subtopic within privacy, and I think you could come up with a really interesting list of emerging trends, right? Maybe to kick off the AI discussion. I mean, I think it's interesting and something that I'm personally trying to grapple with and understand is Gen AI versus other types of AI applications, and how lawmakers are thinking about those and the distinctions between them, if they're thinking about the distinctions between them when they're coming up with guidance and legal proposals, and how that will guide what we can do as a business. There's always following the trends in U.S. states. Ali mentioned the Washington My Health My Data Act, this idea that we're rapidly transitioning from privacy laws of general application, a sort of GDPR type of universe, into more specific privacy laws that are dealing with specific kinds of data. And to the point about reconciliation, trying to keep everything straight so that you are not applying multiple regimes to the same data element, right? Which can often be the case, and trying to figure that out. So, and finally, I think enforcement will be really important to watch now that I feel like we're transitioning from a place in privacy law where it has been more theoretical. We have the GDPR is years old; it's well established. We have the California that law is fairly well established. It's been law for a little while, so now we're going to be looking for what enforcement will be, and that may significantly change the landscape again, depending on what comes before regulators. So it's exciting and scary.
I agree with all your points. I really appreciate what you're saying about going from what feels theoretical and academic kind of into the real world of enforcement. I think we're all feeling that. Ali, over to you. I know you touched earlier on the evolving state privacy laws. What else? Like, where do you see opportunities for maybe young lawyers in this space?
Yeah, just to kind of add to what Alex said in terms of privacy law, both getting more general and getting more specific. It's getting more general in the sense that we're having these state comprehensive privacy laws, right, that are, applying, with exemptions to generally all of a consumer's processing activities within a certain state. But then we're getting laws like Washington's My Health My Data Act. We're getting these data broker specific laws. We have biometric specific laws. So there are all these various areas for people to specialize. And then to build on the emerging trends point that Alex mentioned, I mean, generative AI obviously is a huge issue. It has been for the past, at least the past 12 months where it's really taken off. The other issue that I think that is coming up more and more, both from an enforcement perspective and now companies are paying more attention to it, is this issue of tracking technologies. I think it was really it's kind of the e-privacy directive with the cookie banners that brought, initial knowledge to it. But now we're seeing U.S. regulators really focus on it, especially the FTC. And these are things that every website uses, right? Every website uses Google Analytics or some sort of analytics tracker to just measure the effectiveness of the site. But now we're realizing that depending on what you do with the data, there could be real privacy implications with it. So that's something to pay attention to as well.
That's great. Ron or Steph, happy to give you a minute if you want to talk about how you see your practice developing over the next year.
Yeah, I think Alex and Ali hit it on the head. I mean, really, they made some excellent points about the enforcement and about tracking, because they go one and the same. That's something that is dramatically changing right before our eyes, because a few years ago, regulators, first of all, they weren't examining companies like they will now. But even if they did, they don't have the type of visibility into data practices and data sharing that they do now via the tracking expectations, et cetera. California specifically, they're hiring a lot of very smart technologists, people who really understand how the tracking works. They know it better than many companies know their own tracking technologies. And once the enforcement goes into effect, they're going to be there in California examining websites, applying their skill sets and knowledge about, okay, I see what is going on here. The stakes are going to be much higher for companies to really understand what is happening on your websites. What exactly are you doing? It's not good enough to have a privacy policy that someone drafted that is directionally correct and some lawyer, checks the box and says it looks great. It can't just look great. It has to be true. And you have to have controls in place to make sure that it is exactly what you say it is, because if you don't catch it, somebody will, and the stakes are going to be a lot higher than they ever have been before.
And I'll just add on to that, not just for privacy specifically, but the regulatory environment is evolving, right? Good enough isn't good enough anymore. So sometimes it's not on a particular topic, but just the volume of work that needs to be done to raise the bar and get to that next level, right? A team of 5 could have handled something, 2 years ago, and now you need a team of 10. So I think that even though we're in this economic environment where it doesn't look like there's maybe a lot of growth at some companies in some areas, because of the regulatory environment, you're going to find that growth in the risk, the compliance, and the legal space, because those are the people that are helping raise the bar on the regulatory expectations. So I think if not a specific trend or law, just the overall bar being raised and the work effort underneath that.
I just want to say thanks to everybody on this call for sticking with us to this point. We really, really appreciate it. If you have questions, now is a great time to start pinging them in. I don't know if people can come off mute, but if you want to ping them in, we're happy to answer them. I've got a couple questions for this group because I'll take the opportunity of things that I'm wondering about. And let me just relay kind of the question I get all the time is we talked a bunch on this call about how things in privacy are new, rapidly evolving, and there isn't just some textbook in the library you can check out and be like, I'm going to catch up on this whole privacy law thing. There's no way, because every day it feels completely new to me. And every day I feel the pressure of, it's kind of one of those things where it's the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. And if you get far enough, you just realize the wide chasm of things out there that you could learn about. So my question to this group that I will throw out that I get all the time is, how do you keep up on this field? What are the resources you're using to stay current on everything that happens? I'm happy to hear from anybody who wants to jump in on that.
I'll go out on a limb. Usually my daily kind of rotation is whatever the Future of Privacy Forum says, whatever IAPP puts in its daily news feed, law firm blogs, and any other kind of the FTC business blog. That tends to be a big one, but of course it's going to differ internationally depending on your regulator. So that's usually my rotation.
Yeah, I agree with all those. The one thing that I specifically use is Twitter or X, where you follow the right people and they are constantly on top of new developments. I mean, these changes happen literally in real time, right? Like where there's a new FTC guidance or there's new developments in the EU, and it's hard to read full-on articles about every one of these developments and do your job. But it's helpful to get a 30-second summary of the notable developments, so at least it's in the back of your mind.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think one thing I found incredibly important, especially the last few years, has been benchmarking sessions. And not even just the formal ones, like through our industry, we have Bank Policy Institute, et cetera, where you get all the banks and they're all comparing notes and so forth. But, the larger the crowd, the less likely you're going to get real pertinent information. So, Dan, Steph, and I, we're a good example. We periodically pull up together and say, hey, what are you guys working on? What are you working on? How are you thinking about this? I do that with a number of great friends like Dan and Steph, and have smaller sessions where you really establish a trust tree with your true peers, in your industry, same job, comparing notes. And that is where I tend to get the most insightful information, because maybe they heard about what really happened in some enforcement action, or maybe they heard about what's really going on in some examination that, by the way, it's coming towards you, so you might want to think about this. Like, that's the type of thing that has been incredibly valuable to me over the years.
Yeah, I just totally echo that and agree with you. Back to your earlier point earlier in the session, talking about the types of people who gravitate toward this profession and how friendly they are. I find the opportunity to reach out to you and others just so valuable to benchmark. And I often find even cold kind of reaching out to other chief privacy officers, other big banks or other big Canadian banks, people I don't even really know. I often find them extremely receptive, are willing to jump on the phone with me. And 9 times out of 10, they're grappling with exactly the same question we are, and we have a chance to talk through it, hear what each other are doing, and I think that's great and valuable. An excellent question coming in about it says, how do you negotiate the needs of marketers to use cookies and pixels while at the same time the protection of consumer privacy? I know that's a tough question. Certainly, Steph and I have spent endless times kind of grappling with that idea. But I don't know, Ron or Steph or maybe Alex, what are you all thinking about that?
And this goes into sort of the alignment with the business leaders too, because different banks and also the benchmarking too, because I found it's really interesting when you talk to different banks, big banks, about how they've approached the compliance obligations versus the business needs. There have been some banks that have largely shut down digital advertising, whether it's specifically in California or in some cases across the entire United States. They just shut it down. And I can tell you, like, at my company, that wasn't going to happen. But that was a discussion that we've had, with the marketing leaders, the business leaders, the risk leaders together. What's the approach? How's it going to go down? And then connecting with legal to make sure, hey, do we have the right contractual terms? Connecting with third-party risk management. Do we have controls? Do we understand what the third parties are really doing? Can we prove it? Can we monitor it? If a regulator comes and asks us to prove what's happening, can we do that? Like that's all. It all goes into it. It is not really a one-size-fits-all solution. I think you have to think about your particular company. What are the needs of the business? What are the compliance and legal obligations, and how can you pull it all together to make sense?
Yeah, just to build on that, I mean, I think that the first question I would ask if I were getting this from a business stakeholder of mine would be, what's your goal? What do you need? What's the output that you want? And this is where it gets into what we were talking about with, having a learning mindset, being engaged, knowing the technology, because you may have a business stakeholder set whose mindset is, I can only use cookies or a certain kind of tracking technology or a certain company to accomplish what I want to accomplish. And part of your job, whether it's a privacy engineer or lawyer or whatever, at least in my mind, is to provide them with a broader set of options. And that implies that you understand what those options can be and how they fit within the risk tolerance of your organization.
And Ron, one specific question coming in from you. You mentioned up top, obviously very public, that Truist went through a giant merger a couple of years ago, probably. To the extent you can talk about it, sort of how do things play out in terms of the merger?
Sure. Now, it's a great question. I could probably do a 1-hour session just on that. It was, a very detailed process. It was an incredible experience for me. I mean, it was a unique opportunity to kind of build a new privacy program at a company this big, that doesn't come around a lot. So it was exciting. I would say in terms of challenges, when you take two different companies that have different ways of doing things, they have different systems, they have different people, different objectives, different policies. A lot of it, at least at the onset, was comparing and contrasting. How did SunTrust do something? How did BB&T do something? Does one of those approaches work better than the other, and we're going to run with that? Or maybe both approaches weren't ideal. We're going to do something completely new and trying to marry that all together, and building a team to make that come together. That was extremely challenging. And I think one of the hardest parts, kind of what we've been talking about around things like tracking and notices, et cetera, just making sure that as a chief privacy officer, it's ultimately I'm accountable for all of that. So how do I get comfortable that I know what's really happening across a new organization? And that was something that really took my team over a year, conversations with the technologists, with the business leaders, the compliance leaders, to understand what's happening and what do these businesses do? How does that impact the larger organization? It was a lot of just learning and then building a new program to support all of those lines of business. But it was exciting.
Godspeed. Better you than us. That's all right. So let me just close out by, first of all, thanking all of you who joined. We're thrilled to have so many people on this call. And let me just say a giant thank you to every panelist, to Kendall, to Lawrence Harvey. Every person on this call is a senior leader in this field who's here on their own time because they think it's important to share this information and encourage good folks to join this career track. And so I know I speak for myself, and I'm hopeful I speak for everyone on this call. We welcome contact from you. If you want to reach out and talk to us, that's why we're here, and we're willing to do that. We care about this practice area. We care about the way it's developing over time. And so encourage you to reach out if you're so inclined. We're happy to talk to you all. So big thank you. Thanks for joining. Thanks to the panelists. And hopefully we will do this again sometime soon.